Greetings, Minecrafters, and welcome to another Minecraft discussion here today on this glorious morning in northern Vermont. And I have to tell you, there's a little G. He just went for a little swim in the beaver pond. Say hi, G. All right. I forgot if I introduced myself again. I keep forgetting. Anyway, my name's Kimberly Quinn, and I'm just thrilled. So this is quite a summer scene going on, which is going to roll right into our topic. There are lots of baby frogs all over the place. And then there's like the big ones doing like a Budweiser commercial. Dragonflies, and wow, it's just great. And a little bit of a breeze. It's awesome. So anyway, what I wanted to talk about today, I got to first give my shout out to Lisa Miller because, as you know, I read a lot, and all of you get to hear about it because it's just, oh my gosh, there's just so much good stuff out there right now. Anyway, she's the author of The Awakened Brain, which I've all but finished, and I just love. And it's just like supporting stuff I've seen in the classroom for years with the young adult population. So we know right off the bat, not coming from her book, just we all know that this current young adult population is among the most anxious and depressed the United States has ever seen. We know that to be to be sure. I mean, we're absolutely sure about it. And so Lisa's whole thing is about the awakened brain is about how we are wired for spirituality. Actually, from a neurological standpoint, people think, spirituality is all touchy-feely and, no, this is actual brain structure stuff. And so her book is very research-based, though. She very much writes like a conversation. So I would say I strongly encourage it. It's not like it hurts your head, too many statistics. It's not like that. So basically, we've known about the detriments of depression, for a really long time. Physically, the sleep, the changes in eating, and emotionally, and the distorted thinking that goes along with depression, and all the bad stuff. We've known about all that, physical, emotional, cognitive stuff. What we haven't heard much about is the spiritual piece. And I will tell you that I was inches into her book, and I'm just like, oh my God, this is so validating and supportive from what I've seen in the classroom I've been there at Champlain, which I love, for about 12 years. And it's not all students, but it certainly is many of them, because they voice it at times and in different ways. Many, so to say many don't believe in something that's higher than themselves. They say it. And I mean, think of the pressure of that if it's all here and here. And Lisa Miller's whole thing is that maybe depression and spirituality, and we're not saying everybody's depressed, obviously those boxes and, the spectrum, they're two sides of the very same coin. So what she talks about, that's brain structure-wise, is we know that depression causes structural brain changes. We're sure about that. We're not guessing. We can see that in a regular MRI, which is magnetic resonance imagery. I'm sure most of you are aware that that's that coffin-shaped thing that's totally claustrophobic. And if you blow out your knee or something in soccer, then they can see all the ligaments, and that sort of thing. But the little F, little F in italics before the MRI means functional MRI. And this is different because this tracks activity in the brain. So obviously the most active parts are consuming the most oxygen. So you can chase around the heat. And so basically when parts of the brain are really active, they light up in the fire colors, like red, orange, yellow, right? So she ends up naming the spiritual part of the brain is like the red brain, the spiritually awake brain. So we can cut right to the chase here. So she and her team of people, research team, basically were looking at, perception, kind of orientation, and then reflection. So right off the top, we know that the cortex, the frontal cortex, this is a good example. There's a tree right there. Okay, so think of the cortex of the brain as like the bark on a tree. It's a layer, all right? So, and the frontal lobe is where the majority of our highest, thinking processes sort of reside, which where they kind of happen, right? There's obviously the brain's talking to itself all the time in all different areas, but the frontal lobe is primarily known for reasoning and decision making and judgment and planning and all this kind of stuff. So the cortical the bark on the tree, the cortex on the frontal lobe is dramatically thinner in those who are depressed and at higher risk for depression. We know that to be true. So obviously that brings in the genetics. Whenever we talk about human beings, or actually even non-human animals, there's G, we can't separate genetics. You know, any mental illness, and just name them all: anxiety, depression, addiction, keep going, and also neurodevelopmental stuff like ADHD and autism. It's all got a genetic component, right? And it's a mix, so it's like the nature nurture thing. And so we also know, and Lisa talks about this in her book, that when somebody lives in the home who's depressed, let's say it's mom and dad, or dad and dad, or or somebody and grandma, whoever's around, it changes the whole vibe of the house. It just does. And we're not saying it with judgment, because obviously people don't choose this. You don't go around in a kindergarten on the first day of school and ask the 5-year-olds what they want to be. It's usually firefighters, the president, maybe yoga instructor, cop, doctor, something. They don't usually say, gee, I can't wait to grow up and be depressed and and be miserable and have it mess up my relationships and my ability to hold down a job. No, that's not so, right? So we're not judging. We're saying that people who have struggled with depression, it affects the home environment. It does. Therefore affecting the kids in the home and affecting their own cortical thinning. We just know that to be true. So a thick cortex is what we want. So Lisa did some research to kind of top off other research that had already been done, and lo and behold, when she and her team took brain scans of people who reported having a very enriched inner spiritual life, it was of high importance, and people who had not so much of a spiritual inner life, and it was of low importance, and then also those in the middle, right? And so she found that those who had who reported having a very rich inner spiritual life, it was important to them. They found that the cortex was thick. This means plush, and actually I did not plan this. I'm thinking plush, right? So that people who are highly spiritual, that's kind of like a priority to them, had a much better ability to do all the higher reasoning type stuff for the cortex, because it's thicker. The other thing is the occipital lobe is back here. This is what handles vision. The parietal lobe is here. I think of like Friar Tuck in the bald spot, right? And then we got to talk about those, because she and her team took a peek at those too. And the parietal lobe is sort of involves a lot of spatial stuff. So the way I explain it to my students in cog psych, which is not related to spirituality in that context, it's how because they're very used to, they've just had their driver's test usually sort of recently, and they can relate to the parallel parking, moving up, moving back, trying not to clip on either side. The parietal lobe does all that stuff, all the spatial orientation, right? But it also, and then the precuneus, that was the other one. That's part of the parietal lobe that helps us reflect. This is huge. And so there were structural brain changes here. So the parietal lobe also helps us sort of connect our inner selves to what's going on out here. Okay, it makes a connection. It helps us reflect. It helps us to see the big picture, to see how we fit in this beautiful world we're in. And depression has a direct, not so good effect on that. When with the people who had showed up as high, had high spirituality, I guess let's say that, the fire colors were lighting up all over the place, or in these areas where they were better able to reflect on themselves and connect their place in all of this. And that's huge. And so she ended up calling it the red brain. Remember we talked about the fMRI. It's when it's active in the brain, it lights up in all the fire colors. So the spiritual brain, she ended up referring to as the red brain, and actually sort of has shown, we don't like to say proven in psychology, but that is what she did, that this part of the brain with a high spiritual life, we're not talking about religion. You can make it that, and that's fine. Work your belief system right into being Catholic or Muslim or Jewish or whatever. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about knowing our connection to the divine connection that connects us all, and that there's a higher power, source with a capital S. Call it what you want, but we're talking about this spiritual awareness of a power greater than ourselves, like a creator of all things that also connects all of us together. And when we're more receptive to that, we'll get to this in a different episode. And my friend Tom, I might have to get him on the episode because he did his whole dissertation on synchronicity. He is so cool. I can't say enough. Oh, and Tom and I are actually have started. We are starting a new workshop series. We're going to do at Champlain called Spirituality, Meaning, and Purpose. Anyway, so all this really starts to come together for us when we become open to and embrace our own spirituality. And Lisa Miller's whole thing is about that. We are wired for it, all of us. It doesn't matter where you're born, like what country you're from, how much money your family makes, what your birth order is. It doesn't matter. All of us are wired for spirituality. And I'll tell you, like I was just saying in the beginning, when I read this, it just has supported what I've seen in the classroom, because at least the young adults, I know it's like one narrow life experience over 12 years, they are craving, and I'm capital C, craving spirituality. And just think about it. Once you get it, that we are not really in charge of it all, right? A power higher than us is, and we're open to all that guidance that just kind of happens once you become receptive to it. Think of the pressure that takes off of us. It's not all on you. And these kids today, young adults, and they're really still kids in a way. I know we're not supposed to say that, but they are, because adolescence really goes up to 25, because the prefrontal cortex, which is what we're talking about, isn't developed in either genetic males or genetic females until 25. That's how it is. They're half baked bread, maybe 2/3 baked bread. Anyway, they are craving spirituality. And so I'm beyond elated to offer this workshop this fall, and I think we're going to run it again in the spring too, about spirituality, meaning, and purpose. And expect to hear from us about that. At least me, and hopefully Tom will join me, because I'm hoping it's gonna do some good things for our students. So okay, that's it. We are predisposed. The brain is wired for spirituality. Just got to tap into it and watch things unfold, and it takes the pressure off. This is Kimberly Quinn signing off from the beautiful, plush woods of northern Vermont. Have a mindful day.